I didn't really think we were going to have an episode of The Extra Mile for today. In fact, the original plan was to not have this episode at all. But given what has happened in the world today, and given a couple days to think about it, I've decided that we are going to have this program today because we need to have a frank conversation about race in America. So this is an episode of The Extra Mile that will not have as much racing talk, will not have the Caitlinisms or the happy-go-lucky things you're used to. This is going to be an extremely serious episode because none of that matters until black lives do. Last week, George Floyd was unjustly murdered by the Minneapolis Police Department. What took place afterwards was a week's worth of protests that quickly turned into riots as anger boiled over into rage. And rage turned into a reckoning some 400 years in the making for a country that's history is bathed in the blood of racial injustice. What happened to George Floyd is not a recent phenomenon. It doesn't even go back to what happened with Rodney King 28 years ago. It doesn't have its roots in the aftermath of the civil rights marches with Martin Luther King or the race riots in Tulsa, Oklahoma. What happened on last week was a culmination of a tragedy that began in the 1600s when the first enslaved Americans, or we won't call them Americans, the first enslaved Africans, were forcibly brought to this country. Against their will, they were forced to work in a country they didn't know for people that had no right to take them from their land. And for the ancestors of those people to treat the ancestors of those so unjustly taken as if they are the problem, as if they are the reason that they must do what they have done, it boils the blood, and it fills any right-minded person with rage. That is what I saw in the fires that engulfed that police station in Minneapolis. That is what I saw in the conflagration that destroyed a Target. And in the other cities where buildings burned and the items put so highly above black lives were stolen. That's what I saw. The rage of 400 years coming back to prove a reckoning on a country that is yet to do right by those poor individuals stolen from their homeland. And with that, I welcome you to this episode of The Extra Mile. I welcome Caitlin Seam in, who had a similar show today on Not What It Seems. Caitlin, the last 2 weeks as protests are continuing, much more peaceful than what we saw during the weekend. And at the start of the week, I think the one good thing we can say is that the fire is not dying out like we've seen recently. It's only intensified over the last few days.
Honestly, I feel like until recently, I came to really appreciate social media more, because when all of this started, we've gotten a lot more people are posting things live. They're posting it directly to their feed. And so a lot of these things where like the uppers are trying to almost skew everything against what's going on. A lot of it, for example, with the looting and the riots and all of this stuff, at first the big blame was like, oh, it's not peaceful protesting. They're all causing so much trouble. They're causing all this damage. They're doing all of this looting. And really what we're coming to see is, first off, the violence that's happening, it's not coming from the protesters. And a lot of the looting and main parts of the rioting, a lot of that's not coming from the protesters either. But I think something people need to come in mind, too, is that, for example, and I can say this directly, I am not a black person. I am a white woman. And I can say directly from this, there in no way, shape, or form is anybody who is not black allowed to tell a black person who has been oppressed their entire life how they can mourn, how they can protest, how they feel right now. And so if you want to burn down the country you made, then you're going to burn down the country you made. Nobody can tell that. I can't hold that against you. I have not been oppressed in that. I am not black. And so I have no right to say that. And I think that that's one of the big things that's getting missed on the point, because they're like, oh, well, peaceful protest. Well, look at what Colin Kaepernick was doing the entire time, and nobody agreed with that, and that was the most peaceful thing you could do. And while it's important to show solidarity, and things can get hurt over that, you know, I think one great example to look at history is after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, they had riots and protests for 6 days straight before they passed the second half of the Civil Acts, right, with the Housing Act. And it took 6 days of full-fledged rioting for anything to come from that. And there was over $47 million worth of damages done in that time frame.
You can you can actually go to 8th Street here in D.C. and see the stores, see the plots where the stores were that were destroyed by the riots to this day, where those stores have not come back. And I'm not going to approve it, but I'm not going to chastise it either. After what has happened, after everything African Americans have been through, the inequalities in policing that we need another hour to go into in depth, the inequalities in education, not at the college level, but at the K through 12 level, that is well documented. The inequalities when it comes to getting a loan in the job market. And I can go on and on and on with all those equalities, and then to see what happened to George Floyd, where a police officer, put their knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds until he died, as he sat there on the ground begging for his life and calling out for his mother. If every African American in this country decided that moment they were going to rise up and burn this country to the ground, could you blame them?
Absolutely not.
Could you sit there and blame us for doing it? After everything and listening to that, they're lucky that there's still a city of Minneapolis standing, because it should have been worse if we're going to talk about it realistically.
And also, things that are being avoided is that it's also a country that you were forced to build.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if we're going to hold so tight onto the looting, let's not forget that, one, we literally looted this country from the Native Americans. We slaughtered them to take their land. The police officers now are looting black people's lives. They are literally stealing them by murdering them like this. They stole George Floyd's life. They stole Breonna's life and everybody else's. And then on top of that, how is it that nobody is talking about, one, all of the looting, the burning, the killing, the burning down of houses and black-owned businesses that the KKK has done throughout history?
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, really, if we're having such an issue with these riots and loots, oh yeah, let's go into the perspective, since this, is a racing show, and so that's sport. Let's just talk about all of the times that white people have started their own sets of riots that have nothing to do with oppression or societal injustice in this country.
Every time somebody loses a Super Bowl, it feels like, or when they win a Super Bowl.
Or win a Super Bowl. Look at Philadelphia. They literally destroyed their city when they won the Super Bowl. They destroyed the city. In California, during the surfing competition, they had riots and looters and literally destroyed part of a city for surfing. There is, and you guys, if you want the receipts, I've posted the receipts. But here's the thing is, so all of these people that are clinging to it, well, it's violent and they're rioting and there's looting. It's literally stop microscopically picking out this thing, because white people have done so much worse in history in all of those regards. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one things that's pissed me off the most is, I mean, obviously this really, it's interesting because when, you know, I think you can agree with me. I feel like we might have had a similar conversation even at some point, Daryl, but one of the big things when Trump got elected, a lot of people cried, a lot of people were upset, a lot of people were worried, and it's literally come to fruition. Like, this is why we were upset. This is why we were crying. This is why we were worried, because of stuff exactly like this. And all of a sudden it's like racists are just coming out of the woodwork lately, but then all of a sudden there's this pushback. And, you know, again, with the, you know, all of these black people are taking a stand together, and then, you know, you have, and all of their supporters, and we're pushing and trying to educate, and it finally has been enough of it is enough. And so it's really this push forward. But then also, like, holy shit, the racist coming out of the woodwork is fucking insane at this point. And, like, excuse my language. And that's what they're, like, they cling to. Well, they're all, it's violent and they're looting. Have we forgotten what history is? Have we forgotten that's how the queer society got their rights? The LGBTQ society? Stonewall was a riot.
Yep.
That's
First
the reason that women got their right to vote. That's the reason the Civil Act went through. Because, yeah, Martin Luther King Jr. was anti-violent, but that didn't mean that the protests and the march weren't violent. Did we forget about Bloody Sunday?
First Pride parade was not a parade. Or first Pride event was not a parade. It was a riot. People need to remember that.
Yeah, Stonewall. And so it's like, that's, and the thing is yes, it sucks and people get hurt and things are, it's not great. This isn't fun, but the problem is that's the point, is that we got to this point and the Black Lives Matter movement hit ahead, and the black community said, you know what? No, enough is enough. We are absolutely done 110%. This is it. And it's sad that we had to get there, but we got there. And now we have to make a change, because it's looking us straight in the face now. You can't, like, I feel like up until this point, at least in my lifespan, it's always kind of been shoved under the rug a little bit. It's pushed aside, kind of overlooked. You know, it comes to a point on occasion, something will happen, but it seems like society in and of itself has kind of always has let it go. The good and the bad, the ugly of it. We've always it's been bad for a minute, but then it goes aside. And then finally we're at this point now where we can't push it aside. And that's when history is made. And the thing is you can't rewrite history now. We're on to you. There's no more, you know, and that's the thing is, and I know that with the racing community, and I guess something to say to the other white people that are even listening to this, because that's who I can speak to on this, is that white fragility is a thing. It's a thing that what I've learned very recently from even my family members that I didn't realize was, number one, being nice does not mean not racist. Those two things do not coincide. There is a lot of ways that racism and oppression happens that people aren't usually, don't seem commonly aware of, but they need to educate themselves. And with that white fragility, you can admit that you're learning something. You can admit that you didn't understand, or you didn't know, or you didn't take the time to understand, but now you're learning. Now you're educating yourself. I hate that old dog, new tricks comment, because that's not how people work. At any point in your lifetime, I don't care if you're 4, if you're 40, or if you're 84, you can change. It can happen, but you have to make a change. I can give you all of the facts. I can do everything forward. You know, Daryl, you can give them all the facts and you can tell them exactly what it's like. But until they're willing to look into their heart, until they're willing to take a minute to look in the mirror and actually figure out what's going on inside of their heart and their mind and their soul, we can't do anything. And it's hard, but that's what we're working against.
We're going to continue this conversation for the next hour, but we're going to take a break. We are going to talk a little bit of racing as our next guest, as we actually have a guest, to spend a good 15 minutes with Amber Balcaen. I think that's the pronunciation of her last name. I'll get that corrected by the time we come out of break. She's going to join us on the program. We're going to take a break, and we're going to get her on the line, and she's also going to have a few words on the current situation. And then we're going to have a much different ending to the program than what you're used to, but you have to stand by, and check that out on the other side of this break. We'll be right back here on the Extra Mile on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey guys, it's Blake Henley, better known as H-Town Blake to some of you. Happy to announce that Bases Loaded is back in full force. We'll be bringing that high heat every Tuesday night here on IE Sports Radio. So come home, get ready, dig into that batter's box, and see if you can chase that high heat, baby. So we'll be coming to you live with all the stats, all the rundowns, all the division rivalries, and every team that's going to make the playoff push to get to that one and only October and get to the pinnacle of what baseball is, to hoist that Commissioner's Trophy when it's all said and done.
Hey, what's up, sports fans? You're looking for a different type of sports talk show, something you haven't heard before? You gotta check out the BS3 Sports Show every other Saturday on 2 Live Stews Radio, 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern. Sports talk at its finest. Always have great guests, playing some good hip-hop. You don't want to miss it. Make sure to tune in to the BS3 Sports Show every other Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern.
Here comes the pitch, and it comes in wide.
On the BS3 Sports Show.
Welcome to the BS3 Sports Podcast. We hope your experience with us is amazing. Sports talk, comedy, social issues, and more. BS3 is the best source.
Hi, I'm Brian McLaughlin. In the National Football League, there are approximately 17 million total fans.
I'm Andrew Guzman. My Dallas Cowboys make up almost 9 million of those fans.
And my Seahawks have a very loyal fan base of around 4 million.
That's more than 3/4 of all the fans.
That's absolutely correct, Andrew. And on the Common Ground Football Podcast, we'll be talking about the good, bad, and the ugly of these teams.
We'll have weekly picks, discuss transactions, injuries.
And we'll chat about the rest of the league, too.
Blake freaking Bortles?
Oh, yes. And Captain Andrew Luck.
Excellent. What about Fitzmagic?
Oh, let's not get carried away now.
Oh, all right then.
Join us each week at commongroundfootballpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcast.
It's going to be
Awesome!
What's good, fight fans? It's your boy, Marcus Los Rate, here to give you what you want, here to give you what you need. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm coming to you live, straight from your mama's basement with a crispy, awesome white tea. We're coming to you live every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
We are back here on the Extra Mile on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We're going to take a brief respite from the conversation because we did have a guest lined up for this program before everything kind of broke, and I still want to give that time to that person as we spend a good 15 minutes with a driver that comes to us to North Carolina by way of Canada. That's Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. She was on the program Racing Wives. She's planning on driving a midget sprint car this season, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her start in racing and what her plans are for this season. Joining us on the program this evening, the one, the only, Amber Balcaen. Amber, thank you so much for joining us this evening. How are you doing today?
I'm actually doing pretty well. How are you guys doing?
Well, we've been, I think, better. I think Caitlin and I could say that. But
there's solid.
A lot going on right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. But let's get into it. So you have this little mini bio posted up on your Twitter account, which makes it a lot easier for us to go on and grab some tidbits of information. And the first thing you mentioned was your family actually raced as a hobby. So what is the racing scene like up in Canada compared to, the United States?
So where we're from, Winnipeg, it's only about an hour from the North Dakota border. So my family and I both grew up racing in the northern states of North Dakota, Minnesota, a little bit of Wisconsin, a little bit of South Dakota, but mainly the northern states. We do have a track in Winnipeg called Red River Cup Speedway. That's our local track. A new one about 5 or 6 years ago was held up in Morden, Manitoba. But other than that, not a lot of dirt track racing in Canada. So we did most of our racing in the northern states.
So how many trips are you guys making, packing up the hauler and bringing it across the border, coming into the United States, do you think you guys are making during the year? Because that had to be a lot of flashing your passport to the point the guys at the border probably knew you guys by sight.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. The border guys do know our families just because of racing, because we go down every single weekend. So when I was 10 years old, that's when I started in go-karts, and I raced in Grand Forks, North Dakota every Wednesday in a go-kart. And for me to do that, I had to get out of school early on Wednesdays, so my dad would come and pick me up, and luckily I got to kind of play hickey from school a little bit for the afternoon, and we would drive up every Wednesday to Grand Forks. I would race. We would just be me and my dad in a pickup truck, and we would drive back, get home late at night. I'd go to school the next morning, and then on Friday, the same thing. Friday afternoon, my parents would take me out of school, and I'd go racing with my parents, just traveling, watching my dad race. So it's really all I have known for my entire life, and I think that's where the love and passion comes from, is because it's really all I know. And I knew I wanted to do it ever since I was born. My mom comes from racing. My dad still races to this day. So for me, it was wasn't a matter of if, but when. And for a long time, my dad didn't want me to race because of, the cost that comes with it, the danger that comes with it. But it was hard for me to watch everyone in my family do it and me not do it as well. So finally, at 10 years old, my dad said, all right, you can race, but you have to come up with a sponsorship yourself and work on the cars. So for the last 18 years, I've raised all my own sponsorship funds and funded my own racing, other than the years that I drove for car owners. So it's been a really tough road having to do it on my own, but it's also been very rewarding.
I think one thing I'll say is that there's one dream that kids want is to get out of school early, and I can imagine the other kids were so jealous that you got to do it 2 times a week to actually not only go racing but see your family race. And another thing, I know when people become parents, they're like, well, I don't want my kid to do X, Y, Z because it's too dangerous. But once they've grown up in it like you have and your entire family has, you should just start putting the money away because you know they're going to be climbing into something to go race at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And keep in mind it was minus 30 degrees in the wintertime, so we weren't doing that every winter. It was just in the spring, summer, and fall months that we were racing, so it wasn't every week. But definitely enough where, I had to take homework with me, and but the teachers were always really good about letting me travel with my family because they knew that I could also learn a lot and have different experiences outside of the classroom as well.
I'm just kind of curious, just because we brought up winter, and so I'm from Michigan, but I have my dad's from the upper part of Michigan, so the Upper Peninsula, but I have Canadian family as well. And did you ever look into, or did you guys ever participate in like snowmobile racing, or did you guys not do that in Winnipeg? Like I know that was a big thing over on my end of the area.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if you've ever heard of Beausejour, but Beausejour, Manitoba was huge for snowmobile racing. And when I was a kid, my dad took me to the snowmobile races. It's something that I was definitely interested in doing. But it was kind of funny. When I was younger, I really wanted to race motocross too. But my parents always thought that was so dangerous that's why they put me in a go-kart, because they thought it was safer. But I would have loved to try both motocross and also snowcross. I thought it was so cool. So never did I get to race snowmobiles. I had a snowmobile of my own when I was younger, up until pretty much when I moved here to North Carolina. I love snowmobiles. They're so much fun, but I never got to actually race them.
I've seen those races before, and they're actually pretty fun. So I'm sad you got to miss out on that opportunity. But you did actually get to climb into, at one point, a 410 sprint car. When did that start? And was that really cool to do, since your dad had driven 410 sprint cars before, to you to actually get into a 410 as well?
Definitely. So my goal as a child was always to race a 410 sprint car. It's something that I watched my uncles doing. My grandfather did it. My dad did it, and I just always thought they were the coolest race car known to man. And it was always my goal to race one. And I raced mini sprints 5 years prior to that. And actually, one of my competitors in the mini sprints really knew that I wanted to move up to the 410 sprint car class. And he saw the talent and ability in me. And he said, hey, I know you want to do this. I want to be a car owner, so let's work together and let's do this. So he actually was my car owner. I still brought sponsorship to the table and everything, and we did a full season together with the Northern Outlaw Sprint Association, traveling North Dakota, Minnesota, Manitoba, and we were able to do, I think, about 30 races that season. I got Rookie of the Year, got a couple of podium finishes, won some heat races, so it was a good year. It was honestly one of the best years of my life. I wish it could have continued, but that car owner, unfortunately, after that season, decided he didn't really want to be a car owner anymore. But during the same time is when the NASCAR diversity program reached out to me. So that's when I kind of opened my mind to and opened my eyes to what was possible for my future in racing. And prior to that, I never thought NASCAR would be possible. My goal was, just sprint car racing. But it really opened my mind to what could be. And I wanted, since I didn't have a ride that next year, I took that opportunity and went to the diversity program, and the following year was in my first year of the NASCAR Wheel and All-American Series, and that's when I became the first Canadian female to win a NASCAR race in the USA and got Rookie of the Year, and yeah, that was a fun year too.
So how did you make up your mind to jump from Canada and just make this trek all the way to the southeastern United States to chase the dream in NASCAR?
There was quite a few events that unfolded before moving down here. I knew that Charlotte was a hub of NASCAR racing, and if you wanted to be a serious race car driver and be a professional and do this as a career, you had to move to Charlotte. At that time, I was in school for business. I had finished my 2-year degree, was going for my 4-year, and my dad actually had a heart attack and almost passed away. and I was sitting in class the week after that happened, and I was not really paying attention. I wasn't listening. I was just kind of daydreaming and, going over the week that just happened, how, almost losing my dad really opened my eyes to what I wanted out of life. And I was sitting in the classroom, and I just realized, I don't want to be here right now. I don't want to sit at a desk from 9 to 5. I want to be a race car driver. And so that day I went home to my parents, and I said, I'm dropping out of university, and I want to pursue my dream of racing. And that was the year prior to me racing 410 sprint. So I knew that Charlotte was ultimate goal, but it was going to take a little while to get there. As being a Canadian, I am technically an immigrant here in the United States, so I had to apply for my P1 athletic visa, which took over a year to be able to process and everything. So it was a hard road to get even down here to race, and just one of the obstacles that I had to overcome.
Okay, well, now I'm really curious. How long have you lived down in North Carolina for?
I've now been here for 4 years.
Okay, well, tell me. So I've been here so we're just having a little, I just am curious. So again, because I'm from Michigan, and so I'm a north to south transplant. And it's funny because I've been here for 3 years now, and I'm actually moving back at the end of the month. First of all, apparently you learn when you move to the south if you're meant to be in the south or not as a northerner. Because, I absolutely hate not having snow. I hate the 90-plus degree weather. And, I'm literally the person, I just want it to be cold. I miss the cold like nobody's business. And it's so funny because everybody else I run into, they're like, you're crazy. I love the heat. So are you, so I'm curious to know where you're at. Because obviously you have to, I moved here for NASCAR as well. And so, I get it. That's literally the only option you have when it comes to NASCAR. But is it? Do you miss up north, or are you happy to be down south? And you're like, oh no, I'm definitely meant to be in the warm weather all the time because I can't. I hate it. I literally am and it was the winter, and I'm like, guys, it's still 50. This isn't fair. I need it to be cold. So are you happy to be out of the cold, or do you miss it a little bit?
Personally, I hate the cold. I love warm weather.
I'm a weird person.
Today was 91 degrees. That was a little much for me. I'm more of a 70, sunny and 75 type of girl. But I definitely don't miss the minus 30 degrees. What I do miss is the people. I really miss, my friends, my family in Canada, and I just love the atmosphere there and how it is socially there. And there's a lot of things I miss about Canada, but unfortunately the cold isn't one of them.
It's not one. I swear, I'm just this weird person. Everybody up in Michigan doesn't get me either. They're like, Caitlin, what? We don't even like the cold.
Honestly, my fiance feels the same way as you do. He moved down here to be with me, and he's from Winnipeg as well. So he's lived here about almost 2 years with me now, and he misses the cold. He's like, this is way too hot. I don't know. It's crazy.
All right. Tell him that he's not the only one. I appreciate it.
Okay, I will.
And for those that don't know the metric system, negative 30 C is negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit, but at that point it doesn't matter. It's just way too cold. So
yes, exactly.
I couldn't do negative 30 either, but
here's my theory. I can always add more clothes, or also it's a very good instigation for getting other body heat involved. You can't take off clothes after a certain point, and you can't take off your skin. You just get to this point where you can't take anything else off.
That's true. We definitely have our air conditioning full force.
Always on. Yeah.
But there's only a certain amount of stuff you can take off in public before it becomes actually illegal. So the cold kind of has that beaten. But you actually got to do a couple of awesome things. You already mentioned, winning the Rookie of the Year and in the Wheel On American Series, being the first Canadian woman to win. You also got to make a couple of starts for Kyle Busch Motorsports in a late model. How did that deal come about?
Yeah, that was a really cool experience. So I built a relationship with Samantha Busch quite a few years ago, and once she seen that I moved over to pavement and won on pavement, she reached out to me and said, I've always really wanted a female at Kyle Busch Motorsports, and I think you'd be the perfect fit. And I was able to meet Kyle, work with the team, We would have had more races, but we just ran out of sponsorship money. That's really what it came down to. It wasn't a matter of me not working well with the team or anything like that. The team's awesome. Loved working with Wes, the crew chief there. And that was part of the TV show as well. So I met Sam actually through filming the pilot of another TV show called Racer Girls. It never went to air. But then when Racing Wives came about, they had one of the wives kind of drop out last minute because of sponsorship conflict. So Sam introduced them to me. Luckily, the producers liked me, and they made me part of the show as well. So that's kind of how the Kyle Busch Motorsports thing all came about, is through TV, but yet Sam seeing my ability and wanting to work with me.
That's cool.
Well, I mean, that's not cool at all.
Samantha Busch is Kyle Busch's wife, for those that don't know.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Like, I like that she reached out to you. Like, that's dope. Like, she's like, you know what? I want a female racer over here. Like, that's cool. I like that was how that connection was made. That's fun.
It was really cool. And one of the coolest days of, last year was, or I guess 2 years ago now, was when I got to be at the track with Kyle, and Kyle came there and coached me. And, whether you love Kyle Busch or hate him, you have to respect his talent and ability. And to be coached by one of the best race car drivers right now, it was pretty cool moment.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. And where did you make those starts for Kyle Busch Motorsports?
2 were at Hickory Motor Speedway, and 1 was at Motor Mile Speedway.
Okay, that's good. That's good. And hopefully we'll be able to see you in a Kyle Busch Motorsports truck at some point. But for now, you're going into the 2020 season, and everyone's schedule was kind of upended by COVID-19. Slowly, the racing has started to reopen. What are your plans for 2020 in racing?
As of right now, I am just focusing on dirt track racing just because the money stretches a lot longer. I can do a lot more races with a lot less amount of sponsorship. The partners that I do have already, we discussed, and we felt that this was the best option. The last few years, I haven't got to be in a car as much as I'd like because of the lack of finances, lack of sponsorship. As you move up the NASCAR ranks, it just increases in finances. So I was looking for $1.5 million to race in the ARCA series and was unsuccessful at getting that sponsorship. So I figured, let's work with what we have now and try to race as much as possible. I'm still actively looking for big sponsors. So I can't say that I won't ever be NASCAR again. That's still very much a possibility. But for me, it's just about getting seat time, getting laps in. So that's why this year I've focused just on dirt for the next little bit.
Did you say $1.5 million just for ARCA?
Yes.
It's no joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I used to work on an Xfinity for an Xfinity team, and yeah, like the money, like the cost of tires alone is outrageous. It's nothing to bat an eye at. They definitely, racing is not an affordable sport for the faint of heart. No. That is for sure.
I mean,
no.
I know I shouldn't be surprised at the price of things when it comes to racing by now with everything I've seen at this point, but the sticker shock still catches you, and it takes how much even, and I don't want to disrespect ARCA, but some of the mid-tier of the racing ladder, it's still really expensive.
It is, and that's why it's so difficult to make it in the sport, is because most people in my position have parents or someone that they know that are able to financially back them until they get to trucks or Xfinity. Then you have the big corporate companies come in. But to be able to ask $1.5 million from a corporate company at the ARCA level, when it's a lot tougher, because you don't get the visual and from the rest of the people, you don't get the viewers like you do in the Cup Series or Xfinity Series or Truck Series even.
So, wherever possible, where are you going to be racing this year so the fans can come out and see you, if they're allowing fans, of course, everything going on?
Yeah, so unfortunately with the coronavirus or COVID-19, all of the schedules have been changed. We did have a set schedule, but certain states are allowing racing and fans, other states aren't. So they're having to adjust the schedule on most likely a weekly basis. But for the most part, we'll be racing in the Midwest. So the states of Missouri, Oklahoma, Illinois when that opens up, Indiana when that opens up, mainly in the Midwest.
Okay, and if you want to see where Amber is going to be racing next, follow her on Twitter at Amber Balcaen 10 on Twitter. She's also active on Instagram. And go out and give Racing Wives a look-see. Season 1 is actually up on YouTube. I didn't hear if there was going to be a Season 2. I guess I can just ask Amber. Have they announced when Season 2 will be coming, if there's going to be a Season 2 for the show?
Yeah, they're still working on Season 2 right now because of COVID again. They have had to put that at a standstill, unfortunately. But they are talking with the network again about getting a Season 2, so hopefully we'll know by the fall.
Okay, you want to keep up to date on that as well. You can check out Amber's Twitter. Amber, thank you so much for joining us this evening for this interview. And thank you for coming on despite, the circumstances with everything that has been going on with the George Floyd case and the resulting protests, and we are going to get back into that, fans, before we end tonight's program. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to give Amber a proper goodbye, and we'll come back on the other side of this. We'll be right back.
Hey sports fans, do you like wine? Well, we've got the show for you. This is Let's Wine About Sports, a show where we talk about wine and sports simultaneously. From the classic Cabernet Sauvignon all the way down to the grapes that you've never even heard of before. Oh yeah, we cover it all. And we'll talk about a little bit of sports as well. Football, hockey, collegiate, women's sports, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to whine about it all. So join me Monday at 8 p.m. on IU Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
I want to thank Amber Balcaen for being the newest guest for the new segment, a good 15 minutes, and hopefully we'll have her back. We're going to get into the conversation again that we had at the beginning of this program, until Black Lives Matter. And the one thing I want to talk, there's a couple things I want to talk about before we sign off. First and foremost, I want to thank the people that have continued the protest and have got them to go peaceful this week. There's actually a protest going on right now in D.C. They're getting a little bit rained on right now as thunderstorms have moved into the area. But second, there is a discussion we need to have, and this broke in a large part due to Drew Brees' quote-unquote comments. If at this point you do not understand why certain peaceful protests are happening, do me a big favor, take your mouth and do this with it. If you didn't notice, that means close it. We're not having these conversations on why they have to do this and why are they disrespecting the flag. It's not about the flag, by the way. We said that about 2,000 times. African Americans are tired of being told that their protest is not the right way. What is the right way? What is the right way to get you to understand that my life matters and that I have a right, a God-given right to live? Please tell me what it is. What is it? We did bus boycotts. You didn't like that. There were freedom buses all over the South in the 50s. Y'all pulled them over and beat up the people that were inside. There were peaceful protests in Selma, Alabama. You fired water hoses at them. Colin Kaepernick, from the opinion or sought out, or a, let me get this clear. Sorry, my brain's starting to go faster than my mouth. Colin Kaepernick was approached by a veteran that gave him the idea to kneel for the flag. Ed Reed did so as well, and they still do not have jobs in the NFL to this day. So tell me, well-meaning white person, what exactly is the right way to protest? We've tried it all manner of ways peacefully, and you didn't like that. People have done it violently because they don't know what else to do, and you don't like that. Just say it that you don't like the protest because it makes you uncomfortable, and save us the trouble of trying to appease you, because we're done. George Floyd's murder should not have happened. This should have been dealt with in 1992 after Rodney King. Scratch that. This should have been dealt with when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Scratch that. This should have been dealt with when the slaves were first freed. And scratch that. This should have been dealt with because you shouldn't have been taking slaves anyway. We should have never got here to this point. And how dare you stand up when people are being murdered unjustly and say that the protest that people are doing to bring light to that fact is not worth it or is not the right way. What is the right way to protest people that look like you being slaughtered by the government? I'll wait. Because you don't have an answer. And you're wasting my time and everyone else's time that is trying to do the right thing. So do me a big favor and shut your mouth. Because I don't want to hear it. The people in D.C. right now don't want to hear it. Individuals in 50 states and 18 countries protesting what happened last week and what has been happening to African Americans in this country for a long time don't want to hear it. And if I lose listeners because of what I just said, fine. I don't want you. I will do this show with one listener till I am 80, rather than to have a racist listen to what I have to say. That's all there is to it. I'm done being civil. I am past being civil with people that think my right to exist is a political point. And if I made you mad, go find the nearest trash can. That's my complaint bucket. At your mama, not me, because I don't care about making you upset. And Caitlin, I know you had some comments on your show as well about this situation, about the reactions to protests. And as you heard there, for people that look like me and Michael who couldn't join us this evening, it's tiresome of trying to appease people that don't want to be appeased. And they say that, oh, this is the right way, do this, and you do that, and they still don't want to acknowledge what you're saying because that isn't the right way either.
And I think part of the big answer to that too is that what they're saying is that there is no right answer because they don't want to admit to something that they know is wrong. Because apparently we have a really hard issue with, like I said, it's literally called white fragility, and there is actually a book written on it. There's a lot of books, so I highly say you need to educate yourself. And two, with all of that, because this is supposed to make you uncomfortable, guys, dear listeners. None of this is supposed to make you feel not uncomfortable. That's the point of this. The point of all of this is to get uncomfortable because that's when change happens. But instead of denying it or nitpicking and just complaining about the looting, or you need to have a hard sit down with yourself. And here's the thing is that Daryl and any other black person that you know is not the person you go to right now for that. It is not a black person's job to educate you on what you've done. It is your job to educate yourself. There are plenty of books written. There are plenty of things to watch. I know that Just Mercy, the video, they actually have made it free on all different platforms that you can watch it. It's actually free to watch to help get the point across even on that scale. There is options you have, and then there's this really cool thing, you guys, called Google. And something that I just want to kind of touch on that I've kind of have come across recently too. One, for anybody, and again, I can speak to white people because that's what I am. I can't talk to anybody else here. You can't just you can't just post a post and be like, Black Lives Matter, and be done. Your job is to be a voice. There is a thing called white privilege in this country. It is very clear. It's very apparent. But the thing is that you can use it for good. And if anybody listened to my show earlier, I literally spent 40 minutes screaming into the void about it. Well, not necessarily screaming, but talking, because it's a platform and I can use it. Use your platform. I don't care if it's just Twitter. I don't care if maybe it's at work. You have a voice, you need to use it. It is your job. It is your job to educate yourself, and it's your job to help make it apparent. None of that is on black people. They have been through enough. They are fighting enough. It is not their job to educate a white person. They have brought it to your attention. Now you need to go do the footwork too. So and it's the hardest thing that I've literally stopped talking to family members so people can make any excuse you want. This is not a difference of opinion that we are dealing with here. There is no difference of opinion when it comes to human lives.
And I think that is the best way to say it, to wrap up the conversation. What has been a difficult 2 weeks and what has been a real difficult week for myself, as the sky is just about as angry as I am. We aren't going to do the usual preamble at the end of the program. At this point, it would be disrespectful with everything that's been going on. So follow our social medias. We will update you on next week's guest via social media on Twitter. And tonight, we aren't going to go out with our usual fanfare, the usual theme song. Tonight, we're going to go out with silence. 8 minutes and 46 seconds worth of silence. That is how long George Floyd suffered before he died. So tonight, we're going to have 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence to close the program. This has been The Extra Mile. My name is Daryl Kinsey Jr. for Caitlin and everyone else here at iSports Radio. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be with you next week. Thank you.